1918. After 4 years of brutal war, Germany is on the brink of collapse. The Allies were gaining strength, bolstered by the arrival of fresh American forces. It was only a matter of time before Germany lost the war. Faced with impending defeat, the German High Command devised a desperate plan, a final decisive offensive that could turn the tide and force the Allies to negotiate peace. This gamble would be known as the Kaiserschlacht, the Kaiser's Battle. The final year of World War I dawns with a sense of impending crisis. In early 1918, Germany stands at a crossroads. On the Eastern Front, victory of a sort has been achieved. Russia has collapsed into revolution and sued for peace, and hundreds of thousands of German troops are leaving the East. But on the Western Front, time is running out. The Allied blockade is strangling Germany's economy and starving its people. Worse, the United States has entered the war, and each passing week brings more American troops to France. The High Command plans a colossal spring offensive, the Kaiserschlacht, a do-or-die gamble to break the Allied armies once and for all. The German High Command is led by General Ludendorff, the hero of battles at Liege and Tannenberg, military genius and the de facto commander of German forces. Ludendorff is bold and optimistic. We will punch a hole into their line. For the rest we shall see. It will all begin with Operation Michael, a massive assault against the British front in northern France. The target, a scene between the British and French armies near Saint-Quentin. The goal, smash through the British lines, turn northwest towards the Channel coast, cut off the British Expeditionary Force, and force Britain to its knees. The Germans have assembled 3 armies for the beginning of the Kaiserschlacht. The 17th Army, under Otto von Below, located near Arras in the northern sector with around 10 divisions. Their mission was to fix the British Third Army in place, preventing it from reinforcing the central sector. The 2nd Army, commanded by Georg von der Marwitz, positioned in the central sector opposite the British 5th Army. The 2nd Army consisted of roughly 20 divisions. Their objective was clear: break through the British lines and advance swiftly towards Amiens. The 18th Army, led by Oskar von Hutier, stationed in the southern sector, facing what was considered the weakest segment of the Allied defenses. The 18th Army comprised about 17 divisions. All these men were prepared to end the First World War in the Kaiser's favor. Yet the path to victory was far from easy. In the center of the Allied front, the defenses were dangerously spread thin. The British 5th Army, commanded by General Hubert Gough, holding an extensive front. The 5th Army had 14 understrength divisions. The British 3rd Army, led by General Julian Byng, stationed north of the 5th Army near Arras. The 3rd Army was composed of 16 divisions and well-supplied artillery. Their primary task was to hold their sector and reinforce their beleaguered comrades if needed. The French 1st Army, commanded by General Marie-Eugène Debigny, positioned further south in reserve. Their role was to react swiftly to any breakthroughs. In the pre-dawn hours of March 21st, an eerie stillness fell over no man's land, the calm before an unprecedented storm. German officers checked their watches. 0 hour approached on this, the day Ludendorff risked everything. At 4:40 a.m. on March 21st, 1918, the Western Front erupted in flame and thunder. In one moment, night turned to day as over 6,600 German guns opened fire along a 70-kilometer front. It was an annihilating hurricane bombardment, one of the most intense of the entire war. High explosive shells pulverized British frontline trenches and strongholds, shattering dugouts and burying men alive. No area was spared. An incredible 3.5 million shells were fired in 5 hours. British troops called it a wall of fire. At around 9:40 a.m., the bombardment abruptly ceased. This was the moment the German infantry had been waiting for. Waves of specially trained stormtroopers surged forward in small groups through the smoke and morning fog. They were described as ghosts. Isolated British strong points fought back bravely, but they were soon surrounded. All along the front, the British forward positions collapsed under the ferocity of the onslaught. By late morning on March 21st, the Germans had torn a gaping hole in the British line. Ludendorff's plan to end the war was coming true. German troops penetrated 6 miles beyond the British front on the first day. Thousands of British soldiers cut off and their forward posts surrendered in groups. British casualties on this single day reached 38,500, killed, wounded, or missing, making March 21st, 1918 the second worst day in British military history, exceeded only by the Somme first day in 1916. German losses were also heavy. Assault units took about 40,000 casualties. Crucially, the British line had been ripped apart at its center. A wedge had been driven between the 3rd and 5th Armies. The road to the Somme Valley lay open, but the offensive had only just begun. March 22nd, day 2 of the offensive, brought no respite for the Allies. General Gough, commanding the 5th Army, saw his front essentially disintegrate in order to retreat. The German 18th Army, under General Oskar von Hutier, the southernmost striking force, surged forward with particular speed. Hutier's men, veterans of Riga and Caporetto, used infiltration tactics brilliantly. On March 22nd, they reached the Crozat Canal and began pushing toward the vital Somme River crossings. The scale of the German advance was unprecedented. By the end of March 23rd, German troops had penetrated up to 12 miles in some areas, a deeper gain in 3 days than either side had managed in the preceding 3 years. He came through us like a scythe, drove us back so far, so quickly, recalled one British officer. French Commander-in-Chief Philippe Pétain initially held back reserves to cover Paris, fearing this might be the main German thrust toward the capital. By March 23rd, it was clear that Ludendorff's offensive aimed to split the Allied armies and seize Amiens, the crucial railroad hub behind the British front. On March 24th, the first French units entered combat on the southern side of the breach, counterattacking near Noyon and Chauny. On the same day, the Germans seized a major prize, the town of Péronne. Allied command realigned desperately. The British decided to relieve General Gough of command of the 5th Army, blaming him for the disaster. Bapaume fell to the Germans, as did Noyon to the south. By March 26th, the gap between the Allied armies had stretched dangerously. French and British leaders agreed to unite their command under a single leader for the first time. French General Ferdinand Foch was named Allied Generalissimo, coordinating all Allied forces on the Western Front. This decision did not come a moment too soon, as the situation was approaching the brink. On March 27th, German troops captured Montdidier, a key rail junction 30 miles directly east of Amiens. If Amiens fell, the British and French armies could be severed from each other. The fate of the war balanced on the knife's edge. However, signs emerged that the German offensive was losing momentum. The advancing troops were entering into a logistical nightmare on the Somme battlefield. Men struggled to drag guns and wagons through mud and wreckage, and the further the stormtroopers pushed, the fewer reserves and artillery could keep up. Moreover, the stormtrooper units themselves paid a steep price for victory. They suffered thousands of casualties. With troops beginning to loot, Ludendorff noted in frustration that his advancing soldiers were drunk with victory and wine, which slowed the offensive's tempo. March 28, 1918. 1 week into the offensive marked a turning point. Ludendorff ordered a bold attack to widen the northern side of the salient and possibly break the stalemate there as well. German forces struck the British Third Army around Arras in what would be called the Third Battle of Arras. If Arras fell, the Germans could have rolled up the British flank from the north. However, this time, the British were ready. Byng's Third Army regrouped in strong defensive positions near the old Arras front of 1917. When the German assault came on March 28th, it crashed into a wall of determined defenders. As a result, the Arras attack was repulsed with heavy losses. Ludendorff canceled further major attacks in that sector and refocused efforts southward towards Amiens. The pause at Arras gave the Allies something invaluable: time to breathe, as reinforcements from across the Allied world began entering the fray. From across the vast reaches of their empire, British divisions took up position on the front. In the south, French reinforcements under General Fayolle and Debity arrived to secure the line from Montdidier to the north. By the end of March, the Allied front had largely stabilized, and the pace of German advances had noticeably slowed. Now Ludendorff put his eyes on a critical sector just east of Amiens, near the town of Villers-Bretonneux. Capturing Villers-Bretonneux would give the Germans high ground from which their artillery could shell Amiens and threaten the city's fall. Determined, Ludendorff tried one more time. On April 4th, 1918, he launched a powerful attack, the Battle of the Havre, aimed at seizing Villers-Bretonneux and breaking through to Amiens. German forces made progress, overrunning the village of Le Hamel and forcing British defenders back towards Villers-Bretonneux itself. The situation was desperate. Amiens lay only a few miles beyond, but the Allies had concentrated their strength. Australian brigades, fighting alongside British units, maneuvered swiftly to counter the threat with a spectacular bayonet charge. The unexpected counterattack punched into the flank of the advancing Germans. In intense close-quarter combat, the attackers fell into confusion and began to retreat. By the evening of April 4th, the Germans had been pushed back nearly 2 kilometers, returning to positions held before the attack. The line was stabilized once more. Amiens was saved. The first battle of Villers-Bretonneux was a victory for the Allies. One final desperate act of German effort came the next day, April 5th, along the northern flank of the salient, near the river Ancre, the sector of the 3rd British Army. German forces made a push in the sector, starting the Battle of the Ancre, in an attempt to improve their positions and perhaps force the British back further. But this attack failed to achieve any significant gains. The British, now well dug in and reinforced with fresh Canadian battalions, repelled the Germans decisively. After 16 days of continuous operations, Ludendorff finally called off Operation Michael on April 5th. The first part of the Kaiserschlacht ended in failure to achieve its strategic objectives. In raw terms, the Germans had tactically thrashed the British Fifth Army and mauled the Third Army. They inflicted roughly 250,000 casualties on the Allies, 177,000 British and 77,000 French, and captured many guns and supplies, including over 1,300 Allied artillery pieces and 200 tanks. The British Army, though bloodied, was not broken. The vital rail hub of Amiens was threatened but never taken. The British and French armies successfully closed ranks, denying the Germans the decisive split that Operation Michael had aimed for. As one French general summed it up, the Germans had their prey within their grasp, but it escaped. The Allied line was bent and battered, but ultimately it held. Ludendorff himself grew somber in the offensive's aftermath, realizing that despite all the territory seized, the Allied armies remained coherent and dangerous. And what a cost Germany paid for this temporary triumph. Around 250,000 German casualties in 16 days, including a large portion of the elite stormtrooper corps, losses the Kaiser's army could ill afford. As Ludendorff's adjutant later noted, "We have won ourselves to death." In the final tally, Operation Michael failed to deliver victory and sealed Germany's fate. With the German Empire's hopes dashed, the stage was set for the final act of the Great War, the Allied counteroffensives of summer 1918, which would finally bring the curtain down on Germany's imperial ambitions. This defeat paved the way for the Treaty of Versailles and the eventual rise of a new Reich from the ashes. Thank you for watching, and welcome to the Westfront.